The United States is currently going through many crises. We have, of course, the ongoing pandemic. We still have an opioid crisis out there, but there is another one that is not getting the attention that it deserves, and that is the human trafficking crisis here in the United States. I have Mike Papantonio with me. Mike has a new book coming out very soon here. It's called In Human Trafficking. And this is your fourth novel in recent years, actually. So I know you've worked on human trafficking cases. You've now turned it into this book. So give us just kind of the quick picture without giving too much away.
Yeah. You know, what I've found is that people, when you can tell a story, it's a fiction book, but it's based on absolute, most of everything in the book is true in one form or another. And what I do is I take cases. For example, we filed the first national human trafficking case up in Ohio, where we're trying to spin that into what we call an MDL. That's a multi-district litigation group where all the lawyers in the country converge and we try to solve the problem. So we filed that, and the story in this book, In Human Trafficking, is driven by what we filed. You can almost take our complaint and that we filed in federal court, and you could follow that complaint and understand what the book is about, in the sense that this particular book focuses on the same characters that if you've read the other novels. You have Deke, you have Carol Morris, you've got all the same characters in this book, but this is a little more intense. And the other books have had, terrible tragedies, but I don't know how it gets any more tragic than human trafficking. So what we've done is taken a couple of cases that we're familiar with. One case happened right down the road where you had people in the Ukraine that were recruited to come over here to the United States and supposedly to move into the restaurant business. They were supposed to be greeters. They're supposed to learn the service industry in the United States. So you would have the traffickers go to the Ukraine. They would set up applications and interviews as if they're going to get this job here in the United States. And they'd bring them over here and they'd say, well, okay, I need your passport. I need your identification, and I'll keep your money for you and just give you money as you need it. And we're having to do that because of the immigration laws. And of course, it was nonsense. But they would start the girls working as greeters at a restaurant, maybe for 2 weeks. And then they would say, well, would you like to make some more money? Because, oh, by the way, we happen to also own a strip club right down the road. And if you're a greeter in the strip club, you'll make more money there in the strip club. And then 2 weeks later, oh, by the way, if you don't mind taking off your clothes and going up on the pole and dancing, you're going to make more money. And then 2 weeks later, oh, by the way, Tom out here in the audience wants to take you on a date. And it's a step-up process, okay? And in each process, they're making more money. The trafficker is actually keeping most of the money. That person then becomes dependent on the trafficker. That's just one type of trafficking, but that's what this particular book focuses on because it's so prevalent. And so the story is one where the main character, Deke, Nicholas Dikotomis, is running a law firm, and he's confronted with somebody who's been caught up in that process. They're actually being held prisoner. And that person who's being held prisoner understands that her best friend was trafficked and was sold to some folks that own a boat. And her death takes place on the boat because of the way they abuse this girl. And so she's simply trying to hire Nicholas Dikotomis, or Deke, who also has a national reputation for handling big cases. And that's where the story starts. He then understands that the law enforcement generally does nothing to help traffickers. It's very rare that law enforcement even understands how trafficking takes place. So he takes on a civil case with the thought of then merging it into a criminal case. And it's a lot of intensity to this book.
And we see it in the United States too, not just with the international folks. We also see it, I know we've had the trucking industry, hotels and motels and truck stops. I mean, there are a lot, as you just pointed out, there's no just one scam.
Yeah,
there's no one way.
The trucking, very interesting. I know you did a story on this. My memory is right. The trucking industry, what happens is they'll take the trucking business is with this type of human trafficking is primarily U.S. citizens, girls who are runaways or whatever the situation may be. They pull them into trafficking. Most of the time, it starts in L.A. This type of trafficking, the girls are then trucked in semis down Highway I-10, which is across the southern part of the United States. In a semi, they may put 10 girls with bunks, beds, and the truck moves down the road, and the trucker will get a call. It'll be an announcement with some type of code. Stop number 35. If you stop at 35, then the message is you're going to be able to have sex with an underage girl. And so that trafficking takes place all the way across the United States, all up to that's also part of this book. It's part of, we show how that takes place. Another type of trafficking, and again, it's part of the story. This is not a nonfiction book. It's fiction, but the true stories are told through those fiction words. The other part that was discussed a little bit is the Romeo process. And the Romeo process is where a girl may be at a bar. She may have a normal life. And a Romeo, who's good-looking, American boy most of the time, with another good-looking American girl, approaches the girl, and they start talking about fun parties and all, and they'll take that girl to what's supposed to be a fun party, and you never see her again. The next place she shows up is in Dubai or Mexico City. And so all of this goes on, and most of the American public is completely in the dark about it, totally impervious. And the whole purpose of this book, Farron, is to give them a story. But when they walk away from the story, they've learned something they didn't know. They've learned about the underbelly of a really ugly, ugly business. There's a character that's created in this book that I love. There's a matter of fact, right down the road from where I live in Fort Walton Beach at Hurlburt Field, they train these special op people called PJs, pararescuemen is what they're called. And these are people that make it through the most grueling training ever. A lot of them start out as SEALs. They may start as SEALs, they may be Delta Force, they may Green Beret, but the person they're looking for in there is not the team player. They don't want, I'm part of a SEAL team. They want the guy or the girl who says, I'm not a team player. I'm on my own. So they recruit that person and they put them in this training called PJ training. And these are people that if, let's say a politician is being held captive in Zimbabwe and they need to go and rescue that person. They'll drop the PJ out of 40,000 feet on a halo dive them into the water, whatever has to happen. They operate totally on their own. And then they do the rescue with the support. The only support they have is communication support. And they get that person out of there. It really developed in, I think Second World War is where it kind of started, and then it's just become more and more sophisticated. So this is a young man that's come to work with the law firm, works with Deke. And Deke doesn't know what to think of him, Deke kind of thinks he's just kind of a soft touch because he doesn't do really well in depositions. But he starts learning this guy's skill set is incredible. And so he's part of the solution as the book progresses in having Deke recover his stepdaughter. I say stepdaughter. He thinks of her as stepdaughter. She's really goddaughter, and she has been trafficked.
And so, similar to Law and Disorder, Law and Vengeance, Law and Addiction, it's not just about telling a compelling story, getting involved with the characters. It is, you want people to walk away from this with some knowledge that this is a real, actual problem here in this country.
Yeah.
So it's educational as well as entertaining, much like the other three books, because they all dealt with real trials, real lawsuits, real problems. Obviously, as you pointed out, you've got the fictionalized parts. You got to change specific details because you can't give away too much.
Folks are murdered here, and
right.
that type.
So it is a really good way to basically teach people without them even knowing that they're learning what's actually happening out there.
Well, I don't think I've ever written a book that wasn't. Most of the time when I sign a book for people, one of my favorite little things to write is, fact is always stranger than fantasy in the practice of law. And so I always write that in whatever I'm writing when I'm signing a book for somebody, because that just is the truth. Most all great stories that you see, fiction stories, are, they get close to what actually happens in the legal profession on one level. I mean, we handle cases, for example, the next book is going to be on terrorism, where we're handling cases where banks are washing money for terrorists. Well, you can imagine the fun we're going to have with that.
So why is it best to tell these stories this way? How is this, so effective?
I think it's effective because people can take a book and they can take it to the beach and they can read a story that entertains them. And it's not forcing it down their throat. They're not, it's not beating to death with bad news, because there's good news in this book. There's solutions to the problem in this book. And they walk away, it's a great story, it's an uplifting story in the end, and they've learned a lot. And so that's what I've really tried to do with all of my books, whether it was the last one was on the opioid crisis, one before that was on where you had DuPont that was killing 70,000 people up and down the Ohio River Valley with a chemical a case we handled. So, but you could read both of those stories and you could say, wow, I think my takeaway is I know more than I knew going into it. I was entertained. And there's a solution here.
So that's great. And as you mentioned, this isn't the last one. You've got the terrorism focus next. I'm assuming, because I've known you for so long, there's other ideas kicking around in there too. So if you want to tell us what may come in the future,
I'm going to do a story on the chemical industry and how paraquat. You're going to be hearing a lot about paraquat in the next few months. It's a case that I've launched. But I think the interesting part of the story is how the chemical industry has taken over control of legislation and regulation, and that they're killing us with no less than 100 different chemicals. And people are just walking, kicking, whistling through the graveyard as it takes place.